Hi everyone, this is Rooster Woodworking, and this week we are cutting a lot of slats, breaking bandsaw blades, working in a very cold shop. And we're making it all worth it in the end. If you've been watching my videos for a bit, you know that a few months ago I made this walnut bathroom vanity. Well, today's project is a walnut slat wall to hang towels from, and will go in the same bathroom as the vanity. I had some walnut left over from the vanity, so I decided to use it for the slat wall. The goal for me was to showcase some of the more interesting grain that some of those boards had. This unique grain was the reason they were not picked for the vanity, but will be perfect for this decorative slat wall. After marking everything, I cut all my boards to length. You might be thinking that cutting those 12-inch wide boards by hand is a stupid idea, but I really like to practice my handsaw skills on such projects. It just makes me feel closer to the craft and closer to the material itself, which is always great. And it's definitely not because I'm way too lazy to pull out my chop saw that's right under there. The next step was to cut a straight edge on all of those boards before ripping them into strips. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. You can use a joiner or your table saw, but I really like to use my track saw because that's what feels the safest for me in my shop. Another advantage is that my track saw kind of has a better dust collection than my table saw, so it makes everything just cleaner. Once I had my straight edge, I went ahead and put all my boards through the planer to give them two flat faces. A lot of videos show the planing process as very quick with only 1 or 2 passes, but the reality is that you'll most likely have to take a lot of shallow passes to get those boards cleaned up. But in the end, it's all worth it. When cutting all the slats, I want to try as much as possible to keep the continuous grain going across the whole slat wall. To help with that and minimize waste, I am using the thinnest blade I have in the shop, which is my bandsaw. Bandsaws can be a really great tool for ripping strips like this. If you set it up right and take your time, you can get really clean cuts. Well, that is, unless you break your blade, of course, then I guess you would get no cut. Yep, it's broken alright. While I wait for a replacement blade, I finished the last couple strips on the table saw, which was just enough to get me the number I needed. A final quick pass on the planer to clean all those pesky edges. Once I had all my slats to final size, it was time to make a very important decision. When I first designed the slat wall, I had in mind to use boards that had really straight grain, so it wouldn't be too much of a statement piece, just like this grain running pretty much vertically. But then I realized that the cathedral pattern on the side of those boards was also very interesting, so I needed to make a choice. While I was pondering on this choice, I also cut some extra pieces for the side of the wall and also the backer strips that will link everything together. I then stickered all my pieces to acclimate over the weekend. Okay, so I've let those slats rest over the weekend. There doesn't seem to be a huge bend in any of them or anything like that, so we can just proceed forward. So I have my slats, I have my attachment to the back panel, and then I have my sides, which are a little bit longer, and you'll see later how the joinery works on that. But right now we're going to work on putting a roundover on all of the slats, and then putting dominoes in there for joinery. So let's do this. I opted for an 1/8 of an inch roundover here because I just wanted to soften the edges slightly. This was also a good time to pre-sand all my pieces before finishing. After doing some intense math, I figured out the length of the backers I needed for the amount of slats that I had. This can seem a little... The goal here is to create some kind of frame and then attach all the slats individually from the back. Once I had my mortises in place, it was time for glue up. Using dominoes or dowels for this makes assembly a breeze and ensures that everything will stay square. A couple clamps and it was time to rest overnight. Well, before that, I couldn't resist but throw all the slats on to see what it would look like in the end, and I started getting pretty excited at this point. While the frame was drying, I took the chance to start the pre-finishing process for all the slats. See, those would be pretty challenging to put finish on once everything is assembled. So what I'm doing here is taping the areas that will receive glue before applying the finish. Just like I used in the vanity, I am using Rubio Monocoat for this project, and while I really hate their packaging, their finishes are great. I then applied finish to all the slats, working in manageable sections. Do you ever get those times where your hoarding of random pieces of plywood actually pays off? Well, that's what happened here. I needed a bunch of 3/4 inch strips, and look at that. All those pieces will finally have a use. After peeling up the tape from each slat, I was finally ready for glue up. Don't worry, I also double checked that everything looked good before proceeding. What you see me do here is practicing the glue up with all the steps, making sure that all my tools are within reach and everything makes sense. It seems a little dorky, and maybe it is, but it usually helps me a lot and saves me a big stress while gluing up pieces like this. The process here was really straightforward. Apply glue on the slat, add your plywood spacer, drop in the frame, and then tack everything with brad nails. Then it was rinse and repeat, making sure that all the slats were approximately aligned. I was dreading doing this before I started, but once I got going, it was surprisingly smooth and satisfying. Getting to that last piece and seeing that the spacing was exactly right really made my college degree worth it. While the nails should be enough, I also added weight on top of the frame to let it cure overnight. And after its beauty rest under a weighted blanket, came time to cut the frame to final size. See, I cut everything oversized so I wouldn't have to worry about alignment during glue up. And now I'm using my track saw to cut everything into a straight line. This process was both effective and surprisingly satisfying. To attach this piece to the wall, I wanted to use keyholes because they're surprisingly resistant and also don't require any hardware. All you need is this weird little router bit and a router or router table. I usually would use my router table for this, but because this piece is pretty big, I am using my handheld router with an edge guide. After another practice run, we were ready to go. And just like that, we had a keyhole. I then repeated the same process on 3 more holes, making sure that they all face the same direction. And finally, it was the second and last round of finishing. My decision to pre-finish all the slats definitely paid off here, and I thank myself for it. All I had to do was to finish the back slats and the sides of the piece. And a week later, it was time for install. I simply had to drill 4 holes for drywall anchors and adjust the screws for the depth I needed for the keyholes. What I'm looking for with keyholes is a tight fit that I need to push down slightly. Just like that. And that thing was not going anywhere. Keyholes are surprisingly underrated, but they're a great way to attach things to walls. And that was the final piece. We're still waiting on some hooks to hang towels from, but I think it could stay like that and I'd be satisfied. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.